Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for agreeing to come on. I know we reached out to you through like LinkedIn or something,
yeah,
and but I know you were probably like super bombarded with like a million requests by people much more
yeah.
important than me. So,
No, I'm a fan of your work, so I'm
really?
glad to be able to talk to you. Yeah,
Oh, well, that's so nice. I was sort of thinking, should I like let him know what kind of horrible misogynistic awful person I am before we get started, but I guess I don't have to. We're just two misogynist peas in a pod here.
uh,
So, okay, so I don't know exactly how to start here. Honestly, maybe uh, just a bit of background for the people who haven't watched the million interviews of you already. Um, Google recruited you, yes?
yeah,
Um, Now, your background is in biology and genetics,
yeah,
or
yeah. Evolutionary biology, mathematics, random stuff.
right? So, what made you think? What made them think that you could code? Like, have you been coding just on your own for ages and ages, or?
So I started getting to coding competitions
Oh,
where
okay.
there's like some puzzle that they give you and then you solve it. And I did well enough in one of them that they just decided to contact me.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool. So it was just sort of out of the blue, totally out of left field, and and Google approached you. Well,
Mhm.
aren't you pleased about that now? So I know that people ask you, what's your experience of all this been like? I think that maybe the experience of all of the smearing and the nastiness and everything else has been sort of mitigated a little bit by some of the positive feedback you've gotten.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Why don't you tell me about like what kind of things that people actually when they reach out to you or email you or whatever to let you know that you're not alone, you're not the one crazy person. What kind of things do they say to you in those emails?
Yeah, they generally commend me for my bravery and say that, you know, they're there for me, but, they generally admit that, they wouldn't feel like they could say the same thing in public.
Yeah, that's
That's
a
just sad.
it's a problem because the as we have there's a huge number of people who are actually sensible who are scared to talk, right?
Yeah.
And then there's I think there's like everything seems to be getting a lot more polarized lately politically, and then even
Mm,
in terms of because I'm like a rabid radical anti-feminist, of course, um, but at the same time I don't like I don't think we should take the vote away from women. I don't think that
you're right.
we should bring back coverture laws and things like that. um, I think that we can find a better way to move forward from where we are right now. But I think that on the anti-feminist versus feminist side, everything's getting very hostile. In the anti-SJW side, things are getting very hostile, conservative, liberal, extremely hostile right now, and it's almost like to not take a side, you're taking a side. Like you'll be accused of
Yeah.
siding with the others, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, definitely.
it's just so it's a really, I don't know if it was bravery on your part so much as stupidity. I don't know. Like um
Possibly.
yeah. So I was watching part of your interview with Joe Rogan,
Hmm.
and you mentioned sometimes I give these hour-long interviews with some, and then they just write the same article everybody else is.
Yeah,
You
it's really
know,
frustrating.
I know. Like it is one of those things, right? That because I get lied about in the press all the time,
Hmm.
and so I was just like, oh, this poor guy, right? Did you did you did you know going in, when you were taking interviews from magazines and places like Mike.com and stuff like that? Um, did you know that they were going to do that?
No, I I honestly thought because in the discussion with them, well, sometimes it would be off the record discussions that they would then write an article about. Other times it would be an actual interview.
Hmm.
But in a lot of these off the record discussions, they seemed to really understand what I was saying and see that there was a lot more nuance in what the media was saying. But they would just go and write the same thing. And I later asked them directly, "Hey, do you believe this, or are you just being forced to by your editor or something?"
Hmm.
And they generally just don't answer me at that point. So
Yeah.
I don't really know what's happening. I mean, I think that there is some pressure from their managers to, say a certain narrative. And it's really unfortunate that even if the journalists themselves feel a certain way, they don't have as much freedom as we would like for them to say what they really think.
I
Or they
think.
could have just been playing me. I don't know.
Well, honestly, there, because I've given interviews to people that I know are hostile, like extremely hostile, and they're really nice. They're always really nice,
Yeah.
and and they oh yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh yeah, no, that blah 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 blah, and then they condense that 45 minutes of discussion into like one sentence fragment to give the impression that I'm obsessed with this one thing that we
Yeah.
discussed for like 4 minutes, out of 45 at their request. Um, but yeah, it's like journalists are really tricky. They're sneaky, sneaky bastards. Um, okay, so uh, you also said that the atmosphere at Google. You told Joe Rogan, just because all of this is fresh in my mind
Uh-huh.
from that. Um, that the atmosphere at Google was actually quite chaotic, right? That sort of the form of
Something.
organization. So I don't know. Like, tell me a little bit more about that. In terms of like, are there inefficiencies there that you would personally want to organize things a different way to get rid of, or?
Yeah, I think it's because so many things are organized bottom up at Google.
Oh, okay.
So, any individual engineer can come up with an idea, can write a document and send it to people, and start a project. Uh, that there end up being multiple people that are working on the same thing
Oh,
because it's a 70,000 person company distributed across the world,
so they're
and
basically paying for redundancies, and not
yeah,
necessary redundancies, but unnecessary ones.
yeah, but it's unclear exactly what they should do because you don't want it totally top down,
Hmm.
and so they want and also all of this does create some fluidity and their ability to change rapidly. That helps,
Right.
but maybe in some ways they go too far. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that, like agile project management and things like that they're really well suited to startups and to small
Mm,
companies. It's kind of like that thing where egalitarianism in hunter gatherer societies. And usually when they
yeah,
talk about that, they're talking about gender egalitarianism. But the actual primary egalitarianism in those societies is between men. That's the most important, I think, of distinction is that there is egalitarianism between men, and they won't let any one man get too big for his britches. But when you're dealing with groups of maybe like 150 people in a village, right?
yeah,
It's really easy to spot cheaters and free riders and
mm,
people who were fucking with you, and to deal with them, to apply social pressure on them to pull up their socks and contribute properly or stop being a dick. Um, but I think that and so small companies, that sort of agile, bottom up, everybody contributes in the way that they see fit kind of thing, and choose their own projects and all of that. That works in really small companies, but I think that once you get to a certain size, you need a hierarchy. Um,
yeah,
Otherwise, there's just no way that you can actually uh, be organized in any fashion whatsoever, right? Because I'm
yeah,
sure there are some people working at Google that contribute next to nothing, right? And nobody even knows it, right?
yeah, it's really hard to measure people's actual productivity sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I definitely agree that a lot of these ethics are definitely better suited towards small groups. And, empathy itself is in some ways best for these small groups,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work at large scale.
Well, I mean, there's just no way that you can feel as much compassion for that guy 10 floors up who you've never met as you do for, your own
Yeah.
kids or your teammates or whatever, right? So
Mhm.
I think that a lot of this sort of SJWism and it's a real push against it's a denial of the limitations of human potential. I
Mhm.
think I
Yeah.
think that they wish that people could be different. And if we just arrange things in such a way, then
Mhm.
they will be different. And just, I don't think that it really works like that.
Yeah.
So,
This is the unconstrained utopian world vision that's sort of the left.
yeah, the
And,
noble savage.
mhm.
Yeah. And
And
so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here because I see so much stuff going on. I'm one of those people who has 18,000 dots in my head that are all interconnected, and I wiggle one and then something happens over here and I try to trace back exactly what happened, um, and sit here in my incredibly chaotic, messy, disgusting pigsty of a house, obsessing about this kind of stuff. But I honestly, I don't. How far do you think that they're going to be able to take this before it all collapses in on itself?
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think Google has been able to get away with some of these things simply because they're so profitable with their ad business
Mm,
and they have such a large market share in search that they're able to be inefficient in some ways.
right.
Uh, I I think people are starting to get upset about this, and this whole incident did really like open some people's eyes about how big of a problem it is.
Right, right. So are you going to start using DuckDuckGo?
I still use Google products. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know.
I still use them too.
Yeah.
I got my Chrome browser and I use
Yeah.
Google search. I don't I won't even I have Opera and Safari on my computer here and I won't even touch them. I don't like them. They're not familiar enough. They're not
Yeah.
the same as Chrome. So, yeah. I don't know. I guess that's says something about people's convictions, even someone like me. I'll still use
Yeah.
that. Getting back to your misogyny, um, why do you keep apologizing or saying that you would have chosen not to use the word neuroticism? I'm curious about that.
Well, I think it just overly triggers some people,
Well,
and
of course it
people
does.
can't necessarily, look at it objectively.
Oh, but
So
I think honestly, if you'd said women on average are more prone to negative emotion,
yeah,
they'd have the same reaction.
so I don't really know what other term I could have possibly used because
I
there's not really a positive way of saying it.
There really isn't a positive way of saying it. Honestly, Jordan Peterson said something in one of his lectures that he thinks that the reason for that difference in women is
Hmm.
that women evolved not to be women, but to be the mother-child dyad. Right?
Hmm.
That's their evolutionary process, and because your babies are so vulnerable, right? When it you want to talk about sexist air conditioning and stuff like that, women always feeling cold at the office and stuff. Um, well, that's because if you had a baby with you, right, it was not very
Oh,
well able to deal with the cold, so you had to be sensitive to in order to know that, oh wow, it's getting chilly in here, right?
uh-huh.
I'm going to turn up the heat, or I'm going to put some wood on the fire, or I'm going to bundle my baby up a little bit warmer, or check on them to see if they're doing okay. So I think that being more sensitive to, more apprehensive about their physical safety and all of those things that women tend to be more than men, that's all about their babies. That's not necessarily about their sturdiness or actual physical robustness as women. Women aren't made out of spun glass, but their babies are. So,
Yeah.
they evolved in order to be really worried about a lot of things that men don't tend to worry in the same way about. So, I don't know. I don't know if you, like every time I see a workplace get lots and lots of women in it, it changes all on its own because women demand those changes, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I often see men just leaving because they don't like the new environment. So I don't know if we're going to be able to solve the problem.
Yeah. And I don't know how much, because there's the two different ways of solving this, because some ways they're saying, oh yes, we need, equal distribution within the company and then them totally working together. And that can work in some ways, but also if they do prefer different working environments, then maybe you have different parts of the company that are more segregated. I don't know.
Right. And I mean, you said something about that women's preference for aesthetics and people is reflected in where women are actually doing work at Google. I mean,
Right.
they're working like on front end development and stuff like that primarily. Like, what proportion of the women at Google would you expect are actually doing like the really intense architecture style coding versus the interior decoration style coding, right?
Uh, yeah, I mean, so I don't really know exactly the numbers, but I know that simply because I don't know the sizes of the total number of people working on infrastructure versus front end,
Right.
but I definitely saw the trend of more women working on uh, front end and even products that were more image oriented.
Mm-hmm. I
And and this is a trend that we see in other companies too, of just more women in front end. And some people have mentioned that this could also be related to uh, them simply having less experience because front end generally has less experience.
it's a
But
little
I
easier.
don't know if that explains everything.
Well, I do know that there's some women who do, who are actually quite, they've taken comp sci and they know how to code and everything, but they still prefer to work on front end stuff because they're still doing coding to a certain degree, but so they're still using their skills that they went to school for or whatever, but they are able to channel that into something that actually is enjoyable for them.
Yeah.
And I did read a paper, I think it was done in like 2015, I don't know if you're aware of it, about high math ability and high verbal ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what that indicated is that individuals who have only high math ability and don't also have high verbal ability tend to go into really techy jobs, and the ones
Mhm.
who have both tend to go into something else because they have more options.
Right.
Or maybe their interests in other things led them to work more on their verbal development, right?
Hmm.
And therefore they just have a broader range of interests to begin with, right? And that men outnumber women 3 to 1 or something like that in terms of having only high math ability and not having equally high verbal ability. So I think that when it's almost like they want to get women into positions where they'll waste their talents.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And
Who's
a
going to
lot
do
of
front end development? Like who's going to do that? Somebody who doesn't have a gift for it, somebody who doesn't have an interest in it?
yeah, I don't know.
Are we just going to cram people into doing things that they don't want to do? So that's just to get the numbers right. That just seems very bizarre to me. The whole thing seems absolutely insane.
Yeah, so like I've one thing that we've noticed is that uh, different approaches to computer science between men and women. So women more approach computers as a tool
Hmm.
for improving the world,
Right.
and men approach it more just as a tool to be, or not as a tool, just as a toy itself, and
Something to be fiddled with.
interested, yeah, like interested in the actual system itself and the code itself, and that would explain why more of these application-driven uh, positions like user experience and front end are more populated by women. Also, while some of the server side stuff where you're really just interacting with a server and it's not clear what exactly your code is doing that's actually helping the world. You're just making it more efficient in some way.
Yeah.
That's predominantly men.
Yeah, no, that's been my experience too. I mean, like, I keep telling my guy, who's standing over here listening because he's kind of a fanboy of yours. But I keep telling him, I stop trying to tell me how my computer works. I don't care how it works. I just care that it works, right? And if you keep talking about because he codes in Django right now, and he's doing some software development with a very very small team of like 1.5 people essentially.
Uh-huh.
But it's he keeps trying to tell me how the code works and all, and I'm just like, stop, or I will grab the nearest sharp object and stab myself in the face with it. 'Cause I don't want to know. Like, I have no interest whatsoever in any of that, right? But I do use my computer to make the world a better place. So there you go.
Yeah,
So,
and unfortunately, I think that in some of our computer science courses and some of these programs to get more people into computer science, we label it as this tool to improve the world. But the realities of actually working in software engineering are often, you just stare at the computer for 8 hours
yeah,
and you're not actually interacting with other people and,
not a
creating
whole lot.
products
Yeah,
very quickly.
yeah,
So there's a limit to how many of those type of positions there are. And that's one reason why we see more women dropping out.
I would think so
I would
too.
think.
Um,
Um.
oh shit.
Oh.
Let me put on my headphones, my earbuds, because we're getting an echo. Um, if I can figure out these things, they're very. My mental rotation skills aren't as good as when I was young, so I always put these on backwards first.
All right.
Um, okay, what was I gonna say? There's a website, something interview.io, I believe. I don't know if they were looking for, what they do is they do mock interviews,
Mm-hmm.
whiteboard ones, writing code, and they did a thing. They wanted to find out why so many women were dropping out of their program, and they thought it was because of sexism, that these women were being graded lower than male coders, so they put in voice modulators. They made some women sound like modulated women and some sound like modulated men, and likewise, and put them through interviews. And what they found was that women weren't being penalized in their scores at all. What they found was that after one or two negative interviews, women had 7 times the dropout rate as men
Right.
did, right? And so part of me is thinking to myself, okay, so what happens? How much of that dropout rate comes from this narrative, this sort of Greek chorus that's surrounding women all as they go about their daily lives, right? That's singing, "Tech is sexist, tech is misogynist, they all
Right.
hate you," right? And then you go and you do an interview and you get a shitty score, and you think, well, it's because I'm a woman. It's a totally sexist environment. It's because I'm a woman. I
Mm-hmm.
can't change the fact that I'm a woman. I might as well drop out now. As opposed to being like the men who are thinking, well, eventually my male privilege will kick in and I'll get a job, right? No matter how shitty I am, right? So, I mean, doesn't it seem counterproductive? Um,
Yeah.
to focus so much on this sort of if we can't find overt sexism, we'll have to look deeper, into your brain. Did
Yeah.
they did they put
I definitely
electrodes
think
on your head at the diversity summit?
so. There is this one program in Google that is this three-part thing about retraining your brain about how to think about race. And it sort of felt like I only did the first one, and then I got fired before I could finish it. But it felt like there was going to be one point where they started doing electrodes on your brain. But
Or like a,
uh,
a, a thing on your face with a rat in it, while they all yell, say 2 + 2 = 5. Say it!
yeah, I definitely I can see what you're saying. Where we're telling people it's so sexist, and I've definitely had a lot of experiences where people just insist that, oh, there's so much bias and that's what's holding people back. And they complain so often about all the negative encounters that they've ever had and how that were examples of sexism. When, if like I've had negative experiences too, and I just don't have the same, lens of that is sexism.
Right.
So
Well,
it's definitely hurting people. And I've always felt like, Susan Wojcicki or whatever, the CEO of YouTube, she had that
uh,
one editorial.
we call her Susan Fuck You Poland and your Polish names, or whatever nationality it is. Cause, yeah,
Yeah,
because
I, she said that my document was hurting little girls when really I think that the other narrative is really hurting girls more by
yeah.
saying that you'll be facing this huge uphill battle.
Well, what I found most interesting when I look at my childhood, right? Because well, okay, when I talked to Jordan Peterson over a
Mhm.
little over a year ago, he convinced me to take his personality test and found out a whole bunch of interesting things about how masculinized certain aspects of my personality are, and how very very low in conscientiousness I am. So low that he didn't even comment on it. He commented on most of the other stuff, and then he just left a big long space in the email, and then he put low in conscientiousness at the bottom, right, and left it at that, like, because he's funny that way. But he's got a sense of humor on him, but you need to be a little weird to understand it sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that when I was a kid, like my mom would put on rubber boots and help my dad screed concrete, right? Like, I mean, I came from 2-3 generations of women who did everything, right?
Mhm.
Like they climbed up on the roof after a windstorm looking for, to tack down loose shingles, and they, helped build fences, and, cleared sod to pour a foundation for a garage, and, all of these things. These things that my mom operated a rototiller, and when the other women in the neighborhood would look at her like, why are you doing that? Why is your husband not doing that? She'd be like, don't you have something useful to do? Like, just why are you judging me? So, I mean, my entire experience growing up was that, I can climb a tree just like a boy can. I can fall out of a tree just like a boy can.
Mhm.
I can not whine just as well as any boy. Um, and so essentially, I got that is not the easiest, most pleasant kind of way for a kid to grow up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're free to do what you want. The consequences, you get to own them. I don't want to hear any whining about your, bruised elbow because you fell out of that tree you were climbing, whatever. Um, I think when I look at feminist women who are making all these complaints about not being seen as men's equals, and I look at the kind of stuff that they're unwilling to actually um, do, like change their own car battery or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, or I had a feminist friend who famously, when I was out landscaping in my yard with a pick and a shovel over the course of 3 summers to terrace it and build a retaining wall, and she said, "You're doing it all wrong. You're supposed to rip a page out of a home and garden magazine, hand it to your husband, and say, tell him, make it look like this." And I'm thinking,
Uh-huh.
and you're the feminist, right?
Uh-huh.
You are the feminist, right? Among us. So, I mean, I think that we're actually raising with these narratives, and particularly coming from the people they're coming from. I think we're raising a generation of girls who are just, they're like jelly. They don't have any sturdiness to them, and so I think we're just going backwards in the whole thing instead of forwards. And I really wish we could get rid of some of these narratives and essentially start telling a woman at interview.io, pull up your big girl pants and try again. Everybody sucks sometimes,
Right.
right?
And yeah, so we definitely socialize boys and girls differently, and so we should be cognizant of that. And I we really should look into more of why women are dropping out of that. And I know that, I guess, boys are more used to not getting help often and just doing it themselves. And maybe we should treat women more, or little girls more, like that in some ways.
Yeah, I think
It's
so.
hard.
Yeah, I think so. It's essentially boys are in one of the biggest and first differences that comes out in terms of parenting and how parents differently parent their kids is that boys are fussier than girls on average because they have higher testosterone, and so they tend
Mm.
to be like just more fussy. But parents wait longer before they go and pick them up, and they
Yeah.
comfort them for a shorter amount of time, right? So
Hmm.
essentially boys are being taught right from the get-go that you need to actually manage your emotions. You need to nobody's going to be here at your beck and call every single moment that you're upset about something,
Hmm.
and we treat girls very differently from that. And I think that leads them to give up easier, um, to think that any obstacle is that's where you stop,
Right.
right? So whereas boys are essentially, well, that's an obstacle. I'm gonna go. If I can't go through it, I'm gonna go around it or over it or under it.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, the lack of help, I think actually, the relative lack of help that boys get
Right.
helps prepare them for the world in ways that we're not preparing girls. And we're just doing the exact opposite of what needs to be done in terms of, we're going to ban the word bossy and things like that. Like, cause boys, they never get called bossy,
Mm.
except that they do, and most of the time they get called bullies
Yeah.
when they're behaving that way. So yeah,
Yeah. Or a jerk, or
or
I there
dick
there
bag or
are
whatever.
yeah, like there are gendered terms that are bad against boys, but those terms aren't really being discussed or banned in any way, which is
Well, I
unfortunate.
I personally am all for keeping all the words. Um, like I learned how to swear while holding a flashlight in the dark while my dad fiddled with the carburetor, and I learned at that moment when I was 9 or something like that swearing actually can be an art form, and vulgar gendered slurs can be poetry. When he's calling the carburetor every name that he can pull out of his English as a second language brain.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think we should keep all the words. I think everybody could be a little less sensitive to these things, but that's just me. So
Yeah, I guess masculine and feminine are words that have meaning, right? And so if you take away anything that has a gendered association, then you're removing that meaning
I think,
that is possible.
yeah, I think so. And like when you look at feminine traits and masculine traits, there are positives and there are negatives in both, right?
Hmm.
And oh god, I saw a blog post or something about someone was describing, a feminist was describing, someone had asked her, what would you consider to be toxic femininity? And she lists off all these ways that women are victims. And it's like, wait a minute. And she's like, yeah, because these are the things that harm women. They're people pleasers, and they put aside their own priorities for other people and things like that, and that's bad for women. And I'm thinking, okay, so like, okay, being manipulative, relational aggression, backstabbing, cattiness, queen bee
Yeah.
attitudes, right? Like all these ways that women and girls are aggressive with each other that play out a little differently from boys and men. Those don't count as toxic femininity.
Yeah.
Oh my.
I a lot of people seem to be blind to the whole women are always victims, men are always the perpetrator dichotomy.
Oh yeah, no,
That's fortunate.
it is. Especially, and I think women, because of women's evolved nature, right? There's a reason why they engage in those things in those ways, right? Because
Mm.
you you talked about starting a business being a big risk, right?
Right.
And that men are more likely to be entrepreneurs. Well, men are also more likely to engage in their own violence.
Right.
To throw a punch on their own behalf rather than to play let's you and him fight, which is a
Yeah.
game some women like to play, or pick up the phone and say to the police, my boyfriend is beating me, right? And then they come and rough him up and take him away, right? And engage in violence against him, right? So
Hmm.
these are all sneaky ways of uh, engaging in violence and aggression against other people, right? Backstabbing and rumor mongering and things like that too, as well, right? They're risk
Yeah.
they're risk minimal, and there's always a sort of a plausible deniability there in terms of being able to say, well, I had no idea that was going to happen, right?
Hmm.
Um, I didn't hit him, but I had no idea they were going to carry him off to jail and, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, but I didn't engage in any violence. I just exaggerated to the police, so, or whatever, right? That's all I did.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, like, I think that really I think the differences between men and women actually go further
Right.
um, than what you outlined in your memo, and even what Jordan Peterson talks about in a lot of ways. The differences tend to the way they play out in behavior. You have personality traits, but they combine, right,
Right.
in terms of guiding behavior in one way or another, and yeah. So okay, so I asked you in the email if
Uh-huh.
you could think of a question that you wish one of the interviewers would have asked.
Hmm.
Were you
I
able to
guess
think of one?
maybe just in general, I wish people would discuss things besides just the male female stuff because yeah, I'm generally interested in the world and understanding how things work, right? And this was just one document that I wrote, and I hope that I don't just get pigeonholed into the whole, gender differences thing.
Right.
That so I have opinions on other things, I guess.
You did mention a lot in the memo about.
Mm.
Actually, this is a good segue. Um, about the social psychological aspects of tribalism.
Mhm.
Moral psychology and things like that. And you seem to be, because when I read that memo, everything was familiar to me. I read it first on Gizmodo, and there were no links embedded because they're a bunch of filthy liars. But I wouldn't have had to go and check your links because
Yeah.
I've read all of this stuff before, and you were pulling a lot on the work in your social psychology, tribalistic sort of evaluation of what's going on at Google. You were pulling, I'm guessing, from Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson, primarily.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Lee Jessam.
Oh, okay. And so all of that stuff, I don't know, like that's a really, and I think it doesn't grab the imagination as well as the gender differences because at the moment, because people get more upset about mentioning the gender differences right
Right.
now. I think maybe give it 10 years of the alt-right and the alt-left being at each other's throats, they might be a little more interested in the moral psychology and tribalism things. But so what exactly, what proportion of Google do you think are not progressive in the way that you would have described it in the memo?
Mm. It's really hard, and the breakdown by position is definitely different. But maybe as much as 40%, but that would be a significant number are libertarian.
Right. Are you a
And
libertarian?
yeah, so I at least have like libertarian leanings.
Right.
I don't think that the government should be absolved or anything.
Oh yeah, no, me neither. They call me when I say that I then they call me a dirty statist and yeah, but yeah, I think government needs to exist. I just don't think it needs to be quite as ridiculous as it is right now. But
Yeah.
so and so you are not a social conservative.
Right. But
But you are able to grasp that social conservatives are actually human beings.
yes, that's something that many progressives seem to.
Really not like?
Yeah, they, I, it's something that, and I've had many discussions with people, and they seem to constantly be like, "No, these people are evil. This is exactly what we don't want,"
Mm-hmm.
and this just keeps getting pushed at our company-wide meetings and stuff like that.
Oh God. I and okay, so the entire, like, was any of that anti-conservative sentiment brought into that diversity summit and the implicit bias training stuff that you went through? Was there any of that going on there, or was it just sort of a undercurrent at the company altogether?
Mm. Yeah, they try not to say explicitly that they don't like conservatives,
Mm,
but they are very open about preferring certain political candidates and certain causes.
right.
And I would bring up, hey, we talk so much about these biases. What about our political biases? And
Mm.
they would just not really engage at all.
Oh no, because that, according to was it Stephen Colbert or was it Jon Stewart, reality leans to the left.
Yeah, someone even sent that to me in my initial dealings and was like, are you really that blind?
Yeah, no, they are. They are. I mean, like I'm square in the middle in a lot of ways. I am getting a little more conservative over time, but I don't know whether that is so much of my own attitudes shifting or the entirety of society shifting in the other direction. So
Yeah.
everybody went off to the left, and now I'm really right wing now,
Uh-huh.
just because everybody's over there now.
Yeah.
And
I-
but yeah, I the entire political argument is just fucking hilarious to me because that's the argument that's actually going to result in deaths if it goes too far. And we're never going to have a male genocide, right? Where all the women of the world rise up and decide to exterminate you guys because you have penises and privilege and oppressive natures and you're all woman haters and all that. Because you're not going to be able to convince enough women to hate all men, right, so badly that they're willing to put their own men in ovens. Okay.
Yeah.
But race doesn't work that way. Political affiliation doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You can turn yourself into an echo chamber. The only way to do that as a woman is to become a lesbian separatist and go off and live on some island with a bunch of other women, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but you can actually turn your entire life into an echo chamber. How do you feel social media and the internet has contributed to that?
I think it's definitely exacerbated the problem. People start to only listen to certain sides of the argument, and if anyone has a dissenting view, then they start getting shamed by random people that may not even know them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and you can now just only listen to whatever news source you want, rather than there just being maybe three different ones on
Right.
cable news, and they having sort of a balanced perspective.
Right, right. I actually, Google's kind of responsible for that because they tailor your search results, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when I go on Google and I search for something, it tends to have some idea what I'm looking for, what angle I'm looking for. It still only dumps the things that I'm looking for on page 7 because there's just such when you Google uh, gender violence, right? And
Yeah.
you're just going to get 800,000 things about women before you get to like, Bosnia and Rwanda and the death tolls of men and stuff
Hmm.
like that in those places. So or any aspect of looking at the gendered nature of the violence that men suffer in those kinds of situations. Um, but yeah, they do tailor everything to. Do you think that they're jiggering search results so that a certain political view is going to pop up
I,
more prominently?
so I don't know if they're doing anything explicit like that, but there can definitely be ways in which it's just a subtle manipulation where you know we have these side by sides where we show, okay, with the new algorithm and the old one, what does it look like? And then, oh, there's more CNN on this side and less Fox.
Oh,
It must be
okay.
better or something.
It must be
That
better,
that
yeah.
type of thing can
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah, okay.
like there were a lot of efforts for fighting fake news too. And the sample data that we found was often the pro Trump fake news
Yeah.
and never the pro Hillary fake news.
Oh, okay. Oh, do you mind if I ask? Who did you vote for?
No comment. I feel like
Oh!
that
Oh!
can only cause conflict.
I
But
hear ya. Well, I generally don't vote at all, so in the last federal election I actually was in Canada here. I was actually compelled to vote just
oh
because
really?
oh, well, NDP is our Ralph Nader party basically. Um, and we had Alberta, which is the most conservative province in Canada. They just had 40 years of conservative, back-to-back conservative governments, and they the conservatives were getting to the point where they felt like they could get away with anything, right? Any kind of corruption, whatever. I mean, like we've been in here for 40 years, we're never going to get voted out, right? We're essentially a one-party province at this time, right? And so we can like have all these expense scandals and pull all this bullshit, and we'll be fine. And I'm sorry if you can hear drilling. It's my landscapers out in the yard. We're doing nuclear option landscaping right now. We nuked the yard from orbit, and now we're putting it back together. But so we had a landslide NDP victory in Alberta last election. So essentially, it's like they're heavily socialist, and we are a resource economy, and they want to do things like I don't know if you know anything about mining, extracting things from the ground, and tailings ponds, right? But they want to get rid of tailings ponds altogether because they hurt birds and stuff. And I'm like, you can't.
Mm.
That means you no longer mine anything, not gold, not copper, not potash. You don't extract the oil from the oil sands. You don't do anything, right?
Hmm.
Because you need the tailings ponds, right? But this is what they wanted to do, and so I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's looking like the conservative government at the federal level is going to be voted out. And I'll be fucking damned if I'm in a NDP majority province in an NDP majority country, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to live that way. So I actually got off my ass and went and voted, but that was the first time I'd voted in a federal election since the first time I voted when I was like 19 or something. So
Hmm.
I just can't be bothered with it. I mean,
Yeah,
my chip,
individual.
my one chip that's the equivalent of like 20 million other chips, right? Or 200 million other chips. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
they need to fix that because it's really not worth it for any individual person to vote.
Well, you're actually better off, and this really makes sense. You're better off voting municipal elections and
Hmm.
provincial elections, and if your jurisdiction elects judges to vote for judges, because those are the people that you're going to be able to call and say, "I'm a voter, and I didn't vote
Yeah,
for you last time, but here's how you can change my mind," right? And your vote is going to count in that election because some of these candidates in municipal elections they might win by a margin of 5 or 20 votes, right?
mm,
As opposed to, millions or, hundreds of thousands of votes, right? So
yeah,
it's definitely, there's something worth it in terms of voting in your local area, but to vote for a president, I wouldn't have been bothered. So I guess I'm not going to complain that you won't tell me who you voted for. If you want to tell me after I turn the recorder off, you can. But
okay, yeah.
how much longer do you have to shoot the shit here?
I'm free.
You're free? Okay. Well, we'll go a little bit longer until they really start making noise outside. Um, but if they start driving the bobcat again, I'll go out there and smack them. But okay, so you touched on the gender differences. You didn't touch very much on racial differences
Right.
in the memo. You did mention them though. So
Uh, I just mentioned more that these types of programs can increase tensions between groups, and focusing so much just on racism, for example, can be missing some of the point where there's cultural differences and just economic things that are causing some of these disparities. And it's not just racism.
right, right. I think that the entire approach, like I tend to go with the Larry Elder approach and the Thomas Sowell approach to race issues, which is if you open up opportunities for people, there's actually a fair amount of economic mobility that's
Hmm.
available to people, even people who are poor. But that requires a certain amount of grit, and you don't get grit by being told that everybody's against you and you have an excuse for every time you fail. It's
Right.
somebody else's fault, right?
And
So,
like we also see a lot of distrust of the police
mhm.
and official institutions in certain communities, and that only exacerbates the problem.
What
Like,
I found interesting, Larry Elder was on Dave Rubin. You were on Dave Rubin, but Larry Elder was on there a while ago, and he said there was and I went and I looked at the study. So there was a study out of the University of Washington recently, just like last year or something, that they sent civilians, military, and police into a simulator, a crime simulator with a laser gun or whatever, right? And
mm,
they found that people were more likely to fire on a suspect, whether justified or not, if that suspect was not black.
yeah,
All
I
all three
I've
groups, right?
definitely I've heard a lot of overcorrecting happening.
Mm-hmm. So I think, when you look at sort of what's going on, there are egregious cases for sure, of people getting hurt and killed by the police.
Mm.
But it's, you have to sort of step back and ask yourself, and Larry Elder said this when I was, he said, when I was a kid, my dad told me, if you have a run-in with police, you are polite, you do what they say. If you feel
Right.
like you've been treated unfairly, you go in later and file a complaint,
Hmm.
right? Because you don't want to get beaten up, you don't want to get killed, you don't want to catch that one cop, at the very tail end of his really shitty day where he watched some dad in a standoff blow his kids and his own brains out or whatever, and then dealt with some woman who'd been gang raped, and then now
Right.
now he's dealing with you and you're resisting arrest, and like, does he really? He's at the end of his
Yeah.
fucking string, right? I mean, you have to
Especially
realize cops go through a lot of shit too, right?
especially if you do get a cop that is actually racist,
Yeah.
and you're complaining about it at that time, you're
No.
complaining to the exact wrong person, right?
Yeah, no, don't provoke. Just freaking go along with it, and then complain later. Like that football player uh, who was
Yeah.
in Las Vegas, and he cooperated in the moment, and then complained later.
Hmm.
And that's really the way to do it. So essentially, uh, and when you think about it, these stop and frisk policies and stuff that are supposedly like so racist. Well, I mean, 98% of all stops are of men, whatever their
Yeah.
race, right? Whatever their race. So I mean, like, if they're racist because 85% of stops are men of color, then 98% of them being men, just in general, that that points to what exactly? So I don't know.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate how there's so much concentration on race in the justice system, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no concentration of, men are getting disproportionately tried for a lot of these crimes, and they serve longer sentences than women
Oh, yeah,
for the exact same crime.
and they're twice as likely to be convicted on the same evidence, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy that I don't know if you it's kind of a little esoteric bit of knowledge. This little national conversation that was going on in newspapers in the 1920s about we should just make it give women amnesty when they kill men.
Really.
Yeah, because it's a waste of taxpayer money because it's impossible to convict them. And actually, the musical Chicago was set during that time. And if you look at these women when they were singing that "He Had It Comin'," these are all women who
Oh,
are awaiting trial, right? And
oh.
she's like, I hated the way he chewed his gum. He didn't just chew it; he popped it, right? And I get home from work and I just want a little appreciation, and he pops his gum, and I told him, if you pop your gum one more goddamn time, right? And he popped it. So I got the shotgun down from the wall, and I fired 2 warning shots into his head. He had it coming, right? And in the 1920s, she would have been acquitted probably by an all-male jury who thought she's too
Yeah.
pretty for jail. She cried on the stand, and poor dear, he popped his gum, and it was really annoying her.
Hmm.
So I mean, like, it's extremely strange how we have narratives of women actually being harshly treated by the justice system in the midst of, you know, there was one feminist who put forth a sort of a thesis that it was called the wicked woman effect, where women are more harshly treated in the criminal justice system, and the reason is because they violate feminine gender stereotypes.
Uh-huh.
And so they are looked at as so abhorrent for violating their gender role in ways, in essentially committing crimes, that they are treated super unfairly, way more unfairly than men are. And I'm thinking to myself, number one, doesn't make any sense, and number two, it doesn't make any sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see the evidence for that.
Oh, well, there is no evidence. It's just she
Uh,
has the sense, just the feeling that, these women should have gotten off easier, because there are women who do get convicted of things.
right. I
Um,
mean, there's injustices everywhere, but
well, I mean, it's sometimes not
I
an
mean, on both sides.
injustice for somebody to be convicted, but um,
Yeah.
I mean, there was that woman who tried to use stand your ground laws. Or, no, she didn't even plead stand your ground, but it was in Florida, and it just happened to be a mandatory minimum, and she was sentenced to 20 years for firing a gun in the general direction of her ex and her kids. And she got 20 years for that, and everybody was like freaking out because some guy in some other case in Florida got 6 years for murdering someone, but it was a mandatory minimum sentence in her
Yeah.
case. So that's not a gender issue. That's just an issue with mandatory minimums don't allow judges any discretion, right? So,
Hmm. And
but
so, how much do you think about the justice system and how, people's brain changes so much? Like, it's not fully even formed until they're, say, 25, especially
mhm.
for men. And so we're convicting these people when they're 18, and then 7 years later, they're a completely different person. And, they're not the same type of person necessarily that would go and kill someone, but we're
Yeah.
still convicting them for like 20 years plus.
Well, I mean, I'm of two minds, two minds of that. Um, your fundamental values as a person are generally your personality and your value system are generally mostly formed before you're even in grade 2, right? So
Uh,
what you're looking at with a lot of impulsive crimes in teen
mhm.
years is just really sloppy impulse control,
Yeah.
right? It isn't about fundamental, your fundamental value system. It isn't necessarily even about your personality. It's about your hormone levels being outrageously, if you're a guy especially,
Mhm.
outrageously high. Which is why you see boys tending to act out against others in a lot of ways violently, and when girls of that age act out, they're actually one of the most in Canada. God, who was it? Uh, Janet Bloomfield, I think she dug this up. The most common cause of injury requiring medical attention in Canada for girls aged 15 to 18 is self harm, like cutting, right?
Mhm.
And things like that. So it's you I don't know, the hormones I think play a huge role in the way those things happen, but I think that you have to sort of look at the entire history of the kid, right? Because there are some kids at age 18 whose their brains may change, right? And they may get more control over their impulses, but that isn't necessarily going to make them any less criminal
Right.
in their nature. They're just going to be able to be better at not getting caught. Um, and I actually think that a lot of the issues with disparities in crime between more intelligent people and less intelligent people, or that sweet spot of intelligence that tends to, I think a lot of that might have to do with being smart enough to not get caught,
Right.
right? And so the person with the 85 IQ is maybe not going to be smart enough to control, not going to have the delayed gratification
Mhm.
thing going where they can plan ahead and plan to not get caught, right? Whereas somebody with a higher IQ who might just be just as criminally sociopathic or whatever would be better able to get away with it. So I mean, like there's I don't know how we could rectify the system. I think maybe a
Mhm.
system of constant assessment and for serious criminals, and I think we should only be putting people in prison for like quite serious crimes.
Right.
Um, but there should be a constant assessment of, and people who are actually, I guess, growing out of it, uh, they should be offered early release at the earliest opportunity, right?
Mhm.
Um, because especially in the States, because holy fuck, are your guys' prisons full of people.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
I mean,
I
a quarter of the world's prison population? Really?
yeah, it's pretty bad.
So,
I feel like people have a need to punish though,
mhm.
and so I mean, because there could be the case where there's someone that you know would never commit that crime again, and so putting them in prison doesn't help society in any way,
Right.
but you still feel the need to punish them. And so I guess there has to be some sort of balance. And maybe there could be more segregation based on, okay, these people are beyond help. They go in
Yes.
a certain place. And then these people, they might have a future. Let's
Yeah.
not put that with those other people. I
Yeah.
don't know.
That would be a good idea for sure. Because the quickest way to actually creating a criminal is to stick them in a prison with
Right.
criminals. They're gonna learn shit there. They're gonna have to cross boundaries that they had not crossed before just to survive often. And once you've
Hmm.
crossed a boundary, it just gets easier and easier to cross it again. Um, and then you're releasing them with a criminal record, which makes it much more difficult for them to get a job, be productive, have a decent life, right? Makes them more prone to recidivism and all of those things. And one of the things that I thought was hilarious, because there was a feminist who said the reason women aren't punished as much, um, and the reason why they're not imprisoned as much, right? So they don't get as long a sentence. They just often don't get a custodial sentence at all, is because their recidivism rate is low, right, compared to men's. And I'm thinking, well, okay, but they also qualify for all kinds of social assistance and stuff like that
Right.
men don't qualify for. So when you release a man and a woman from prison with the same criminal record, right, and she's got all of these social programs in place for her to help her out, and he's got nothing but the stigma of a criminal record, of course he's going to repeat offend if he can't figure out a way to make his way in the world, right? So,
Right.
and she's less likely to because she's got welfare, or she's got, free training. She's got a program that she can go into where she can. I mean, here we have special training programs for women to get into trades and stuff. You can get free
Mm.
education in the trades as a woman. Um, and I'm not seeing anybody offering men free education in, nursing or dental
Yeah.
hygiene or, veterinary medicine or psychology or, or, med lab assistant or, any of these things that are dominated by women, right?
Hmm.
So the whole thing is just, it's ridiculous. I don't know, it's very
And
frustrating for me.
so, how do you think we fix the issue of, say, women are more dropping out due to not having the perseverance and being used to getting helped with just the natural tendency of, a girl growing up, if she's pretty, say, she'll get all the rewards. She won't necessarily be judged as harshly as a guy. And so she just won't be as prepared. I don't know how we really change society to prepare those women.
I don't know either. Like I'm kind of the opinion myself that just if women want to drop out, let them drop out. Um, if girls don't want to do their homework and they can find a boy to do it for them, let them do that and then let them fail, right? It's honestly, or maybe tell boys to like stop doing that. I mean, like my guy was in engineering.
Mm.
He was just finishing up his degree when I met him, and he said you wouldn't believe the number of guys in that university in the engineering faculty, right, in the engineering department, who were there were girls who were like, "Oh, can you help me with my?" And he'd just end up doing most of it for her, and
Mm.
then, of course, at the end of the year when she's all done that course, right? Oh, I have you met Bill, my boyfriend? Oh, we've been together for I never mentioned him, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? Really, like, guys still fall for this? Right?
I fell for that.
Oh! Oh, you bastard. See, because he was dating this nursing student who did modeling on the side. I don't know why the hell he picked me. Oh, I do know why, because she's horrible. But she used to try, and she just had nursing. Nursing is not difficult, right? At least the academic work is not difficult. They've basically stretched what should be a 2-year program into 4 years and turned it into a university degree rather than a certificate. Because that's what a general sort of nurse, an RN, right, would used to only have to do 2 years of nursing school, and then and if they want to specialize, that would be a university program. Yeah. But so essentially, you have this woman who's like got to write a essay for English, and he has also a degree in English literature and philosophy because he was a fucking retard and wasted his money for 4 years. Oh damn, he's not listening. It's no good if he's not actually listening. But anyhow, so she's asking him to write this essay for her, and he's just like, even if you sucked my dick, no, right? And then she sucked his dick anyway. So women are weird. You'd probably get further by saying, yeah, no. No, I'm not going to do that, right? You'd probably get more action by telling women no. Strange
Maybe.
as that sounds. So.
Yeah, so I at least personally have a thing where it's really hard for me to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much of that is just I've been socialized to not want it or feel like I wouldn't get it if I asked for it. I don't really know what's behind it.
Hold up your hand like this. Okay, well, maybe it's not biological. Because, I mean, your third finger isn't like super mondo longer than your index finger. It's about the same. It's like... So, I mean, because that's an indication of, like, being masculinized is finger length, right? And I always had that problem. I never wanted to admit when I needed help with anything at all. And that has led to me never nagging my children, and that's half the reason I live in this filthy, filthy palace of freaking fast food wrappers and stuff. So, but yeah, I don't know. It might be socialization. It might just be an aspect of your personality, which is, I mean, your personality is largely inherited, right?
Yeah.
So there is a thing too, because asking for help is a risk in its way, because you're risking being laughed at. You put up your hand in class and you ask that stupid question, right? And everybody laughs at you because you're a dummy. So, I mean, like, I think that I had... My fear was more of being humiliated by being perceived to be dumb than of not getting the answer right on the test. So...
Yeah, I guess there could be some status seeking, or it could be related to that, because as soon as you ask for help, the person that helps you becomes higher in some way.
True. Absolutely true. So it's it's a conundrum. And then there's my daughter. She was perfectly happy to, and the most retarded questions you've ever heard out of this girl's mouth in junior high, where girls are like really starting to be socially aware and vicious, right? And she'd ask the really ridiculous question, and she had no problem with with that. Like she's just like, whatever. She never cared what anybody thought. So
Hmm.
but then she's weird as fuck. So my older boy too. Both of them are weird. So my young one, he wants me to get him a Trump hoodie so he can trigger his friends at school.
Yeah, I'm definitely not one of those people that looks to trigger people or is a troll or something.
Oh, my kid, my 15-year-old, he is a troll 24/7 on the computer, in real life, at school, among his friends, with his grandparents.
Is
Nothing
it,
but trolling.
is it that they seek to cause pain in some ways? I don't know what the inherent
He it's
personality.
it's not that he wants to cause pain. Okay, here's the quintessential thing that he says. Because most of his friends, he goes to a school that's about, well, he used to go to a school that was about 50% people of color.
Mm.
And so half of his friends or more are not white. And so he's got all of these brown friends, and one of them, he goes up to him, Jeremy from the Philippines, and goes up to Jeremy just before the election, and he says, "You know, Jeremy, when Trump gets in, you're going right back to Mexico." And his friend says, "But I'm not Mexican." He's like, "Don't make excuses. You know where you're going, right?" And it's just he's just he's making fun of the broader thing, right?
Uh-huh.
That Trump is actually so horrible he would send a Filipino kid back to Mexico, right? That's how racist he is. All the brown people all came from Mexico, right? And his friend thought it was sort of funny, right? So, you know, but that's just what he does. He just does stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
but he doesn't ever actually say anything mean. I don't know that a lot of people troll just to be goofy and funny and do inside jokes and
Yeah.
they'll give me a hard time about my kitchen and stuff like that. Get back in the kitchen, make Cenk that sandwich you promised him and all those things. So, where's Cenk's sandwich? He's getting hungry. And it doesn't. I don't know. It's just a lot of it is in good fun, and I think people take it the wrong way, or they call it. I guess maybe he's not. Maybe he's just. Maybe a shit poster. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
is that the same as a troll? I don't know, but yeah, he likes to get a rise out of people, and it's kind of like a hardcore version of dad jokes. Dad jokes all being groaners and everybody
Yeah.
going, "Oh, don't tell me any more jokes," right? So, but I don't know. So
Yeah.
okay, so uh, what do you think is? How do you think we can bring the two sides together? Are we gonna have to tie them up and stick them in chairs facing each other on the beach of a deserted island, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I sometimes I think about, I mean, I think a lot of Jonathan Haidt's work can help bring the two sides together.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, but he's on the alt right,
yeah, that's what they're calling him now. But
Not sure, but if not now, then soon.
yeah,
So.
uh, I sometimes I go back to those studies where they have someone like a gay person talk to a family that was against gay marriage or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then that family is now for gay marriage because they know someone that's gay. So like a lot of these bubble effects happen because oh, I don't know any conservatives. All conservatives are those KKK members, right, in the
Yeah.
South, right? And but when you see that no, there are conservatives even in Silicon Valley, and they're normal people.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
your friends,
You probably didn't even know they were conservative. That's how normal they are.
right?
Right.
Yeah, it's because they have to stay in the closet and not express any of their viewpoints that they stay undetected and use this chamber or echo chamber is maintained, right?
Right.
So once it becomes acceptable to start discussing things and identify yourself as not progressive, then maybe people will start seeing the other side as not evil.
Well, I think that that would actually be that would be the ideal thing, because I mean, if you look at any political system, right, they all have numerous flaws, right? Like, you know, if you look at fascism, you look at communism, you look at capitalism, right? You look at libertarianism, right? They all would all work perfectly if people were just robots, right?
Right.
And I mean, like they would all be. These are all perfectly good ways to build a system, right? As long as all of the people who have to be the cogs in that system are all just like robots with no minds of their own,
Right.
and can be programmed, to do that. But once, so what we have to do, I think, is we have to have a constant negotiation between all of the different political sides in this, and there's more than just two.
Right.
And we have to actually decide a lot of things on a case by case basis, right? In terms of, okay, how are we going to approach this particular problem? Because there are some things I think that, having a robust justice system, and a crime and punishment sort of mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, but not for, shoplifting, or, grabbing your wife's wrist to, prevent her from storming out when you're arguing, right? That
Yeah.
I really don't think that you need to be given a criminal record for something like that, right? And
Yeah.
technically, under the law, that's kidnapping, eh?
Right.
Yeah, grabbing her wrist is kidnapping, and assault, and battery, right? Because
Yeah.
you touched her without permission when she could have a reasonable fear that you might hurt her. So, and you stopped her from going where she wanted to go, and that's technically kidnapping. So,
And I mean, the problem with a lot of these is there is a grain of truth to it, right?
yeah.
And the extreme example, that is the case, but that's
So
not the case for everything. There's a lot of
exactly.
nuance.
Yeah, and there's so much nuance in pretty much everything that I think that we need to have a plurality of approaches. And I don't think a plurality of approach is having X many black people and X many Asian people and X many white people and X many women and X many transgenders and X many gay people all sitting on the committee. Um,
Right.
I, I, I don't think that. I mean, and when people ask, when people say, "Don't you think those people have the right to be there?" Yes, they have the right to be there if they qualify to be there.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, who would you rather, if it all came down to one panel of three people to decide whether abortion should be criminalized? Would you rather have Jon Stewart, Al Franken, and Joe Biden, or would you
Mhm.
rather have Ann Coulter, Michelle Bachmann, and Sarah Palin?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, feminists. Which panel would you rather be the one to decide? The all female panel or the all male panel?
Right.
Right? Um, because I don't think you'd want those three women deciding.
Mhm.
And the idea that all black people are, think so much the same, that every black person is a representative of all black people. And then you have these race activists, right? Like,
Mhm.
actually complaining that, as a black man, I'm supposed to be an ambassador for all black people. I'm expected to speak on the behalf of all black people. No, you're not. Right? No, nobody's expecting you to do that. Um, what like, I literally, there was a Jonathan McIntosh video, that fucking smarmy fuck. Pardon my language. Where he was like, 25 invisible privileges of being male in gaming. And one of them was and it has 25 men all talking about the universal male experience of gaming. I will never experience this. I will always be assumed to be this, right? I will rarely blah blah blah. I feel safe sharing my details, right, online, and all of this. And then one of them was, I will never be asked to speak on behalf or expected to speak on behalf of other members of my gender. And I'm thinking, you're 25 men who are doing that. Right? You are
Yeah.
literally speaking on behalf. I didn't ask you. Right? I just have to fucking deal with deconstructing all this bullshit. I didn't ask you to fucking take it upon yourselves to speak for all men. Like,
I think some of that does happen though, where if there's some sort of minority and
mm-hmm.
the majority, sort of understands how they think about things, or they think that they all think the same way, and some for whatever reason, then there will be an asymmetry in them asking the minority what they think more often.
Oh, of course. Well, it's also too like particularly with immigrants, right?
Right.
You're going to have the majority, which is mostly white in America, asking, well, what's your culture like? What's blah 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 blah?
Yeah.
What kind of holidays do you celebrate? All of those things, right? Now the immigrant doesn't necessarily have to ask those questions of every single white person they meet in America because they're immersed in American culture and they are able to
Yeah.
just observe it, right? Whereas I've never been to Taiwan,
Hmm.
and here's this Taiwanese person, probably maybe it's the first one that I've ever known well enough to chat with, and I'm curious about what things are like in Taiwan. Right? And I know that they
Yeah.
lived in Taiwan before they came here, so I'm curious. I'm going to ask them. They don't have to ask me the same thing. So I think that the idea that it's all about this kind of insensitivity
Hmm.
is ridiculous. I think that it's the same with transgender people. Transgender people grow up immersed in heteronormativity, cis heteronormativity. They understand what is they understand in a marriage, they've watched porn, right? They understand the guy is the one who's on, who inserts his tab A into slot B and those things, right? Like they get the mechanics of heterosexual sex, and they like, because they've been exposed to it all. And then okay, this is the first transgender person I meet, and I'm curious because
Yeah.
how the hell does sex work there, right? Like, okay, so, exactly what goes, and does it, do you still have your, and does it actually, work the way it did before, because you've been on hormones, and I'm, and you're curious, right?
Hmm.
Just because, and I've never actually sat down with a trans person and asked these questions. I'm just saying that it can be just out of curiosity, and just general social retardation in terms of, like, unless you're looking to get into a relationship with that trans person, it's probably not really your business to know how that goes down, but it is something that you
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily know, and that you would, and that you would be criticized for if you went and educated yourself with transgender porn, right? Because that's not real sex.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, it's a lot more complicated than just this sort of we expect you to answer these questions or whatever. It's I think that minorities are in a position where they might have those kinds of requests more often.
Right.
Um, but
It's
that
good natured
I don't
questions.
yeah I don't
Like,
think it's bad natured, and I don't think or ill intended, and I can see how it would get tiresome. I'm
hmm.
sure, like looking at someone like you or someone like me, and we have to do the same fucking interview over and over and over again and answer the same fucking questions over and over and over again, right? Um, and it does get a little bit boring, but and tiresome. But you know, I guess the answer isn't to say, well, nobody can ever ask me anything again, right? Or how
Yeah.
dare you ask me a question that's already been asked 5 times of me, right? Go educate yourself. Watch every interview I've ever done, right? And then come back and find some new questions, right? So
Yeah. Especially, at least for me, sometimes it'll be just, those questions will be coming into my brain and it'll be hard to really even think of anything else to say.
mhm.
And I think this causes some of the awkwardness
Yeah.
between minorities and majorities where they want to ask these questions, but they know, or they overcorrect
Hmm.
and they know that they shouldn't be asking these things.
Right.
And so they don't know what to talk about. And, there's the whole thing of if you keep telling yourself not to think about something, you'll just think about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I think like the whole it really is like walking on eggshells all the time, which is why
Right.
I embraced the idea that I'm just going to say whatever the fuck I want, and if you get insulted by that, that's just fine. That's your you can go be insulted over there, and you're allowed, and I'll just be over here having a cigarette, drinking my wine, and saying something possibly rude to somebody else. So, but I think that might actually be my brain atrophying.
Maybe.
I think it was Robert Sapolsky who said in one of his classes that at 25 years old is your peak, right? And then after that it's all
Possibly.
downhill and your impulse control goes down, and when you meet these 40, 50-year-old people who are just like, I just don't give a shit what other people think. No, it's not that. It's not that they have, learned an attitude of not caring. It's because they're brain damaged just through aging, and they don't have the impulse control that they used to. So maybe that's what it is.
uh, I there can definitely be, reasons why our personalities would change throughout the years. And one of the biggest personality differences that changes is going from uh, becoming less open and more conscientious as you age, which
Oh.
makes you more conservative.
Oh yeah,
And
no, that would be that's been my experience with everything. There is really that old saying, if you're not a communist when you're 20, you have no heart, and if you're not
right,
a conservative or whatever when you're or a liberal when you're 20, I think it was. If you're not a
yeah,
conservative when you're 40, you have no brain. Um, and I think actually maybe 30 years old is the perfect age when you're just halfway between, you know.
maybe.
So,
But I mean, so at least the evolutionary psychology reason for this personality change is that when you're young, you want to be open and explore different avenues to find your niche. And it's not so important to be conscientious because you're being taken care of by your parents and your community. But then as you age, you really need to take care of yourself. And it's not worth it to just, be open to every possible thing. You need to be more decisive.
getting down to work. And
Yeah,
you're not just taking care of yourself, you're taking care of,
right.
your family as well. So, and I think that a lot of it really is weird when I hear, a single person who's a single woman in particular who's gone to university and she's in a career, not a job, but a career, and she complains about her life, or she complains about her pay, or she complains about how hard everything is, or whatever, right? And I'm thinking, you can spend an hour a day on your hair. Like, she'll complain literally, I'm expected to look this way. I have to spend an hour a day on my appearance. And I'm like, no, you fucking don't. I never did. I never had an hour a day to spend on that. I was too
Yeah,
busy digging in the couch cushions for milk money for my kids, right? Because, hey, 15 fucking year marriage, I was at or under the poverty line the whole time, right? With 3
hmm,
kids plus 2 stepsons to take care of, right?
yeah,
And so the whole idea that I would even spend money having my hair cut, I
mm,
had my hair long at the time because I could cut it myself, right?
yeah,
And so, like, because $15 for a haircut, That could go somewhere else where it was more needed. So a lot of these complaints that are coming out of like the feminist movement is sort of an ivory tower, in many ways, an ivory tower movement of academia. And I don't think, and there is research showing that the more educated you are, the tighter the echo chamber you live in. And that it's people who are the least educated who have the broadest range of discussion partners. Because they go to the local bar and they meet all types there, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to going to invitation-only parties, right?
Right.
So essentially what we have is we have this group at the top of society who only ever really... It was like when Naomi Wolf, when she said... Well, among my circle of acquaintances, no woman would ever be able to get away with denying her ex-husband access to the kids. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And I said, but you're wealthy, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to follow up with, so both your friends and their ex-husbands have enough money to take it to court every time, right? And they both know that. But I couldn't get the rest out. Because the moment I said, but you're wealthy, she was like, oh, I am not wealthy. You don't know anything about me, blah, 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 right? And I look it up afterwards. She's got a net worth of $3 million, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe as a waitress, you and I have a different definition of wealthy, right? And maybe among all the people she hangs out with, she's not wealthy, right? But she certainly doesn't have any clue what's going on, among us plebs down here, right? So, God. And they're the people who are informing everything. They're making the policies and writing the theories, and they're completely out of touch with the experience of most people.
So like going back to the expectation of looking good for women. So I feel like there definitely is an expectation, but I'm not sure how much of it is just you get a bonus if you look good. Women have a certain sexual capital that men often don't have.
Right.
And I don't know how much they're actually punished if they don't put makeup on versus just getting that extra bonus. And I guess I haven't looked too much into it, but that was always my feeling.
There was a study done. I could find it for you maybe. I had it on my old computer, and then I spilled wine on it, and so now it's gone. But they did a study of a comparison of wages between attractive men and unattractive men, and attractive women and unattractive women, and they found that the attractive women got a bigger bonus than attractive men did, above the average, right? And unattractive women got a smaller penalty than unattractive men.
Really?
So if you were average, if you were 20 points above average or something as a man, you got a 20-point bonus. If you were 20 points above average as a woman, you got a 40-point bonus, right? And then men got the bigger penalty as well when they were unattractive. So, yeah, it's not as simple as women saying, like unattractive women did get a penalty, but it was smaller than the one unattractive men got. And so it's not as simple as saying, I'm expected to look good. I think everybody gets a bonus if they look good. And then on top of that, I'm more concerned with where is the pressure to look good coming from? Right? Because if there was no such thing as cosmetics, right? Men would be perfectly happy dating women who don't wear makeup.
Right.
Okay, they just would. It's not like they'd be like, oh my God, look at all these dogs. None of them has anything on her face, right? Like, no, they'd be perfectly happy. If every woman was, say, a size 14 or higher, right? 14 being Rubenesque, right? So, plump, but still with that hourglass figure.
Uh-huh.
I think they call the women like that thick now, right? They're thick, but they're not fat per se.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if every woman was size 14 and up, men would probably like size 14 women, but they date the other women too, right? Because
Right.
it's a relative thing. It's just like relative wealth or relative income. Um,
Yeah.
it's a relative thing in terms of the scale of what's available, and a lot of women compete on a beauty hierarchy that's part of their dominance hierarchy. That's an
Mm-hmm.
intrasexual dominance hierarchy. So they are competing with each other.
Yeah.
And so the pressure is not just coming from men, right?
Right.
Men set the standards sort of what they consider attractive, right? Here's what's attractive. And then women compete with each other to be the most that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's women who are driving the competition,
Yeah.
right? So, I don't think any man is gonna, look at a woman and say, well, your nipples are too big or something like that, and I'm just not gonna date you. It's just disgusting, right?
Yeah.
Everything else is beautiful. Your personality, you're just wonderful. You're interesting. I like talking to you, but the nipples, yeah, it just doesn't happen. So
Yeah. I
men aren't
think
that picky.
men are generally much more accepting than they're given credit for.
Oh yeah, I
And
what I find hilarious is there's a whole genre of erotic uh, and romantic fiction called Big Beautiful Woman, and it's always this, sort of not morbidly obese, but that Rubenesque woman, right?
mhm.
Who manages to land a guy who looks like Brad Pitt. She's never landing a guy who's equally attractive to her. She's landing the most attractive man on the planet, right? And he
Uh,
loves her just the way she is, chunky thighs and all, right? And I'm just like, yet you're going to criticize men for looking at those men's magazines with hot women in bikinis on the covers and stuff like that. Because
yeah.
hey, those are unrealistic expectations. I'm like, you want to talk about unrealistic expectations? Read some women's literature for fuck's sake. Because
Uh,
holy shit. But
yeah. It definitely seems like, you know, women often will do this just to get the attention from men,
mm,
and that's some of the reward too.
oh yeah, they want to be. Like, no woman goes out in an abbreviated latex dress and stripper heels to not be looked at,
Right.
right? She's going out like that to be looked at. She doesn't necessarily want to be approached, or she maybe only wants to be approached by certain men, and not others. But she's definitely doing it in order to advertise her sexual market value.
Hmm.
And and the hilarious thing is you have shows. I don't know if you ever watched this one on TV. This is way back when I had TV. Called What Not to Wear.
No, but
It
I can imagine.
it
Yeah.
was on TLC, and it had these two personal stylists who would, a man and a woman, who would take a person who dressed like a complete freaking moron. Like, just,
Mhm.
she either dressed like a stripper at the real estate office, to work every day, or she dressed as in baggy sweatpants and shapeless clothing and just looked like a total frump, or he wore pants that were 2 inches too short all the time, and and all of this. And they would take them and they just give them this huge wardrobe makeover and teach them, here's the clothes that are going to flatter your shape, and here's the clothes that give the impression that you want to give given what you do for a living, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking to myself, there's only one area in which we cannot, because they're literally telling these people your clothes are sending messages about yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's the first, your appearance is the first thing people see. They will get an impression from that, and therefore you want to make that initial impression a good one. And but the only area in which you cannot touch this entire idea that people send messages via what they wear is when women dress in not modest ways,
Right.
right? Because according to the narrative, they're not actually sending any messages at all, not even unintended ones, right? And so men should not approach and men should not look because the woman doesn't want them to. That's not why she's wearing that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is just bizarre to me, right? And to actually have a show saying don't wear that, it sends the wrong message, right? Don't wear those frumpy clothes, they send the wrong message about who you are, right? But you can't say, well, don't wear those slutty clothes because they send the wrong message about who you are. You can't say that.
Yeah.
So it's all
Yeah.
very touchy. The whole thing is toxic.
Part of it could be there's just an escalation of, so if everyone else is wearing, this level of naughty clothes, I guess, I don't know,
Oh yeah, then
and
you're gonna go
then
a
you
little
have
bit
to,
further. Yeah. Oh, one of the things at work, and it was hilarious because I had back when I was working, I had a boss. She was pretty hardcore. She was a great boss, and she we used to have to wear a uniform that was black slacks and the company shirt and the
Mhm.
apron. And then she relaxed. The women, the female staff members, were all complaining that they don't like the company shirts. They're made out of man-made fibers. They're not comfortable. Blah blah blah. They're not flattering. So she said, "Okay, here's what we can do. We'll relax the dress code. You can wear a skirt or slacks, black, and and a black top, right? As long as it's professional, as long
Yeah.
as you look professional, and it's black." Right, so then, I got my V-neck, three-quarter length, sort of jersey shirt, wore that. One of the other older waitresses started wearing just a nice button-up black blouse to work, right? But these younger girls, they started wearing black tops with cutouts, right? So,
Yeah.
like big cutouts here, right?
Uh,
Lace backs, so see-through lace backs, the entire shirt. Extremely plunging necklines where you can see the lace of the bra over the top of the shirt.
uh,
Spaghetti straps, so your armpits are showing, which isn't really what you want in a family restaurant. Nobody likes to look at a woman's armpits, right? Unless she's a stripper or, she's waiting tables in a, sports bar or something.
mhm.
And so all of these girls started really taking advantage. Then they started wearing, one of them started wearing high-heeled, spike-heeled boots with spikes all over them, right? Like bondage boots, thigh
Uh,
high, okay, and a mini skirt, and oh my god, like the things that they were trying to, and yoga pants. They were wearing Lululemon yoga pants instead of black slacks, and
uh,
and my boss is just like, what the fuck, right? So she starts writing these rules, right?
yeah.
There's not none. You will not wear this. 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 This big long list of all these violations, right? You will not come to work in this. If you do, you will get sent home. And there was one. You will not wear a plain T-shirt, right? Just like a normal one size fits all T-shirt, because that was
Mm.
the one violation that one of the guys actually made. She was like, "You don't look professional in a T-shirt
Uh-huh.
that you could have bought at a hat store, right? And
Yeah.
it could have some slogan or something across the front." So, and all the girls were complaining. They were just all freaking whining, and
Mm.
then so everything gets back to normal, and it stays that way for about 3 weeks, and then it starts to creep in again, and creep in
Yeah.
again, and she's finally like, "That's it. We're going back to slacks and company shirts. I can't fucking do it anymore," right?
Yeah.
And through the whole time, only one guy actually did something, and it was because it was out of convenience. It was like, shit, this is all I got, a black T-shirt. Like my black button up is dirty, right?
Yeah.
And but all of these girls were just trying to outdo each other on who could dress the sluttiest and who could get away with more and stand out more. There was one, she was wearing a skirt so short, we had short aprons, and so from the front it looked like she wasn't wearing a skirt at all, and from the behind I'm thinking to myself, girl, you need two haircuts to pull that off, right?
Uh,
Because I'm like this far away from seeing something that I don't want to see, and you're standing, right? God forbid you have to crouch down and pick anything up,
yeah,
right? And it's a family fucking restaurant, and these girls, they just had no clue. So I don't think it's I think this is like an innate behavior among young women.
maybe, yeah.
Like, I think they have an impulse, especially when the other women are doing it and they are trying to outdo each other, right? So I
But
really
do you,
I don't think it was the guys who were, promoting that or reinforcing it or anything. So, but
do you think that they would get higher tips if they dress like that?
from according to MythBusters, they'd get higher tips from both men and women
Uh-huh. If they dress
if
more
they
revealing.
dress, especially if they have big boobs. In fact, if you stuff your bra as a waitress and you have big boobs, you get higher tips from both men and women, which is weird.
Yeah, it's definitely surprising for the women. I don't know why they would tip more necessarily.
Maybe it's a status thing.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe it's like you got these giant knockers, you must be high status, give you a better tip, suck up to you a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But people are weird.
And so why do you think girls paint their fingernails? Because
So they can
I don't know
show
if men like that.
everybody how much work they don't do.
Yeah, okay. That was sort of my theory.
They
They can waste so much time and they don't work with their hands necessarily.
they don't.
But although like I don't know how much of that is conscious versus just
Oh, it's
we
all
see high status women that have this, therefore
it's all subconscious, I think. High heels too. Look how far I don't have to walk, right?
uh,
In my average day. Um, Look at how much dirt, I things I don't have to scrabble in the dirt for because I can have these really nice nails. Same with the hair. Look how much time I don't have to spend out in the wind and rain, right?
yeah.
Because I can have perfectly an elaborate, perfectly coiffed hairstyle, right? Um, and a lot of these uh, inconvenient clothing, right? That's if you look at historically, peasants were dressed in really practical clothes. And it was the
Yeah.
aristocracy who were dressed in these elaborate confections of ruffles, including the men, right? Of
Hmm.
ruffles and pleats and, things that would get caught on the edges of tables, and your sword would get tangled in your uh, your your tailcoat, your coat tails, right? And so all of these, but that's all because they were the leisure class, and they didn't have to wear clothes that could endure, any kind of vigorous work or anything like that, right? So
Yeah. Mm. So is there so there's definitely an asymmetry though, and women are judged more by appearances. And so
I don't think so. I
really,
think women are judged sexually, right? Like, as far as is this is this woman someone I'm sexually attracted to, right?
mhm,
That's a lot of that is going to be about appearance, right? Versus
right,
a man can he can compensate with his personality and sense of humor and charm and
money,
flipping great wads of cash, yeah,
yeah,
and or his status or whatever, right? So looks don't matter in that regard, but looks matter in all kinds of ways, in terms of
right,
whether you're going to cross the street to avoid somebody.
yeah,
Looks are very important there. Whether you are going to feel uneasy approaching someone, right? All of those things. Whether they will have to yell or just speak in a firm tone to make a child cry.
Yeah.
Women generally have to yell before the kid cries. Men just speak in a firm tone and the kid just dissolves, right? And that has to do with looks. Kids are more likely to interpret a male face as being angry when it's sad or some other negative emotion. They're more likely to be able to differentiate those in a female face and interpret it all as anger in a male face. And I think that has to do with just the general understanding that women would be likely safe as nurturers, right? I mean, when you look at tribal warfare and stuff like that, you're looking at a lot of competitive infanticide going on, and
Yeah.
the murder of young children in one tribe, boys anyway. And so, I think that essentially there are ways that men are judged on their looks that women are not,
Right.
or they're judged in different ways on their looks. So, but it's not it. You can't. Yes, the sexual thing. I think women have a harder time finding things that would provide enough compensation, to make up for a lack of physical attractiveness. So.
Hmm. Yeah. So the not being able to distinguish different emotions on a male face, that could also be, there could be those links too, but could also be partly explained by them just not seeing male faces as often. If a mother takes care of them more often.
That's true. That's true. They may not have as much experience in that. Or they may not see those kinds of faces on men, even if they have men around them. Men don't tend to walk around looking sad.
Yeah.
Like they would have seen their mother crying or looking sad, maybe, and not their dad or whatever, right? Because men are more likely to conceal those emotions from other people. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. But they don't necessarily conceal anger because that one's permissible. Oh, somebody's there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think they might be about to start making some serious noise out here. I think they have the cement mixer now. So, so maybe we'll let this. Oh God, there they go. We'll let this go for now.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever feel like picking it back up again
Uh-huh.
and chatting more. I'm glad we could have a conversation that wasn't just a series of bullet pointed questions that you've answered already. So.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And
definitely. I mean, it was nice to see your perspective on a lot of these things, and we got to talk about a lot of different things that I haven't talked about before.
oh,
That
that's
was,
good. No, I'm happy. I'm glad I could do that for you. And yeah, just let me know if you feel like getting back together, or if you want to go on Honey Badger Radio and do a fireside chat with Brian. He's generally a good interviewer. He asks really good questions, and he doesn't talk as much as I do. So you might be able to get a word in. So if you want to think about doing that, just let me know.
okay.
And you have a good one, and just keep on keeping on. Don't let the bastards get you down.
All right. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Bye bye.
Talk to you later. See ya.
Bye.